Hey guys, tonight we are waking up in ancient Egypt, barefoot, blistered, and already regretting the choices our reincarnated soul made 3,000 years ago. The sun hasn't just risen, it's kicked down your door, slapped your face, and declared war on your entire epidermis. You're lying on a straw mat in a room made of sun-dried mud bricks that absorb heat and return it with interest. The linen cloth you slept under feels like someone left it on a stove overnight. Outside, the first rays of sunlight have already turned the courtyard into a bread oven, and you are the crust. You sit up and instantly regret it. The clay floor is warm, too warm. It is as if the gods microwaved the Nile Valley overnight to test your loyalty. Sweat beads form faster than your thoughts. Your mouth tastes like dry papyrus and regret. You reach for the water jar, lukewarm, always lukewarm. Cold water is a myth invented by poets. And don't even think about a breeze. The air is so still that it feels personal, like it's choosing to let you roast. You open the shutters, hoping for mercy. Instead, you're hit with a gust of air that smells like sun-cooked goat and humility. Your neighbor's donkey stares at you, already sweating and judging your survival ability. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is, because this global heat stroke deserves context. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wrap a scrap of cloth around your head, hoping it might function as sunscreen, hat, and spiritual protection. It does none of those things. Your sandals, made of papyrus, are already fraying. You step outside, and the heat hits you like divine punishment. Your feet sizzle against the packed earth. You hiss. The lizard on the wall nods in solidarity. The sun is already high. It shouldn't be, but it is. Time isn't linear here. It's measured in sweat levels. By noon, the stones on the road will be hot enough to bake offerings. You'd test it with bread, but you're fresh out. And besides, your skin is currently the appetizer. You pass a group of farmers already at work. Shirtless, brown as polished cedar, and moving like they've already accepted death as a daily co-worker. One of them waves. You nod back while trying not to faint. You're expected to help with irrigation today. That means hauling buckets of Nile water up to the fields by hand. This sounds fine until you remember the Nile is also home to crocodiles, hippos, and various plagues in splashable form. The rope you're handed is frayed. The bucket leaks. The sun is now directly overhead and shows no signs of negotiating. You whisper a small prayer to Ra, god of the sun. Not to ask for relief, but to tell him he's overdoing it. Even in the shade, there is no escape. The houses radiate heat, the alleys trap it, and the market square smells like fish guts, slowly baking under divine supervision. Every surface is either scalding or sticky, or both. A passing priest fans himself with a palm frond. You envy the palm more than the priest. People say Egyptians worshipped the sun. You start to think it was less reverence and more fear-based diplomacy. You try spitting to see if your mouth still contains liquid. Barely. You wonder how anyone survived like this for a lifetime. Then remember, they didn't always. Heat stroke wasn't invented yesterday. Some people dropped dead before lunch and were buried before dinner. And the irony? This is the dry season. You trudge home as the sun begins to lower, smug and satisfied with its daily execution. You peel off your linen, wring out the sweat, and wonder if you'll ever feel cool again. Not stylish, temperature-wise. Just before you lie down, you spot your neighbor doing what you should have done hours ago, digging a shallow hole and napping in it. You nod respectfully, a true professional. Tomorrow you'll try that, if you survive the night. Do you think bathing in a river is a romantic, poetic, timeless experience? Think again. Because when you're bathing in the Nile during ancient Egypt, you're not washing your body, you're negotiating with death, using homemade soap made of mud and the fragile hope that today isn't a crocodile day. At dawn, you carry a clay jar down to the riverbank with the determination of a soldier. On one side, the layer of dust clinging to your skin from the previous day. On the other hand, there is a rumor that someone lost an entire foot yesterday after stepping on a nest of water snake eggs. You pray for two things: cool water and intact skin. The riverbank is nothing like the paintings. It smells like mud, dead fish, collective sweat, and just a hint of cow dung used to ward off mosquitoes. You step into the water, and your skin tightens from the cold. In the first 2 seconds, you think, not too bad. Then something slimy brushes past your leg. You try not to scream. An older man bathing nearby chuckles as if you've just been officially initiated. You begin your bath by scrubbing sand into your skin. It's not a spa, real sand. It's like exfoliating with divine-grade sandpaper. You scrub until bits of your body flake off like expired plaster. But at least you feel clean, using a very loose definition of the word. The river water isn't clear. You don't know whether it's murky from mud, silt, or the unresolved souls of last year's drowning victims. While pondering this, you spot a child on the bank relieving himself into the current. You nod. A closed-loop ecosystem indeed. Historians still debate whether ancient Egyptians bathed daily or just symbolically washed their hands and applied perfume. Some sources say they were obsessively clean. Others claim they were only clean if your definition of clean is slightly less smelly than a stone-hauling mule. You've experienced it firsthand, and you're starting to lean toward the second theory. A couple nearby is scrubbing each other's backs with a bundle of heel-scrubbing leaves. Romantic? Maybe. Unless you notice them staring at a baby crocodile that just surfaced downstream. You pretend to be calm. But deep down, you know, if mama's nearby, you'll have to swim like gravity was never invented. You're done with bathing and decide to rinse your mouth with river water. Mistake. Big mistake. Something soft enters your mouth. It could be a bug. It could be a piece of dead fish. You swallow out of panic. Good luck with the aftermath. Back on shore, you lie in the sun like a lizard, hoping your skin dries before the mosquitoes find you. A woman nearby is drying her hair by flipping it repeatedly. You copy her. You get dizzy. She smirks. You crawl home, your body cleaner, but your soul uncertain. You wring out your wet loincloth on a reed by the door, step into your house, and swear you'll never bathe in the river again. Until next time. You're hungry. Not the modern, oh, is it lunchtime yet kind, but the hunger that makes your stomach twitch like a wet cat clawing at the memory of the last time it saw meat. You've just survived a catfish-style river bath, and your body urgently demands fuel. You look around your mud brick house where a jar still radiates warmth from the previous night. Inside it, beer. Not the fizzy, chilled kind in a glass with a tempting white foam crown like in ads. No. This is fermented porridge, a thick, cloudy yellow brew that tastes like cereal left too long in a leather pouch swinging from a camel's back. You take a sip, and it feels like your mouth's being hugged by a damp rag that smells like mushroom. You sigh, and turn to the loaf of bread sitting in a straw basket. It looks harmless. It's not. Ancient Egyptians were known for adding sand to everything, including flour. Not on purpose. Their stone mills were just overly enthusiastic. The result? Crunchy bread, rich in minerals, and capable of dulling bronze knives if eaten recklessly. You take a bite. Crack. Don't. That's not the crust. That's your tooth. A tiny shard breaks off. You swallow silently, telling yourself, calcium is calcium, no matter where it comes from. Outside, your neighbor, a gaunt elder whose eyes have seen everything from floods to flu-stricken donkeys, is dunking his bread straight into his beer bowl. That's how true hunger eats. You follow his lead. The texture can be described as coarse mud sprinkled with gravel. The taste? It's kind of like moldy rice porridge mixed with glue. But you eat anyway, because your body no longer cares about flavor. It just needs the strength to endure Egypt. A child runs by, gnawing on a raw onion like a snack. Crunch. You try not to cry. Not from the onion, but from envy. You find a piece of old cheese in the corner of the room, slightly moldy, suspiciously soft. But you're Egyptian now. You peel off the outer layer and eat the middle. If ISIS doesn't see it, it doesn't count as violating ancient food safety laws. Historians still debate whether the ancient Egyptian diet was a miraculous balance of nutrition and devotion, or a matter of surviving on whatever didn't run away fast enough. Archaeological evidence suggests their teeth were worn down from chewing bread full of grit. You're currently experiencing that firsthand. Breakfast ends with you rinsing your mouth with the last beer, wheezing like an uncle hit by a gust of stormy wind. You burp softly. Your cat walks away, visibly offended by the smell you just released. You stand up, belly full but soul hollow. Maybe from the calcium loss. Maybe because you just ate something that would be banned for life by the FDA in any other era. But you survive, for now. You wipe the sweat from your brow, glance toward the blinding sunlight outside and think, it's only morning. You thought ancient work was all embroidery, lounging under trees, and occasionally tossing herbs into the air to please the gods. Wrong. Wrong in a way that hurts your back and peels your soul with sunburns deep enough to blister across lifetimes. Because today, you must do what no one in ancient Egypt could avoid. Labor. The first task of the day is hauling water, not from a faucet like you're used to. You carry a massive animal hide bucket tied to a rough rope and head toward the riverbank. There you will sweat before you even get water. Because the Nile doesn't deliver itself, you must scoop, pull, wade, pour, and repeat. You slip twice in the mud. A man walks by carrying a bewildered goat, looks at you, and shakes his head. New here? You want to reply, but your lungs are too busy gasping like a fish on land. Before you can breathe, you're called to stoke the kiln for brick baking. The project is a long flood wall, or as the overseer calls it, a sacred national effort for the glory of the pharaoh. You look at a brick. It looks back. Both of you feel hopeless. You carry bricks from the sun-drying pile to the mud mixer. Unfired bricks are as soft as raw banana cakes, but once fired, they're as hot as coals kissed by Ra himself. You burn your hands 3 times before learning to flip bricks with your feet, a new skill worth bragging about. At midday comes something they call a break, meaning you get to sit in the shade the size of a shirt button, eat bread, and drink porridge beer. You share a chunk of bread with an older woman who tells you she once worked at a quarry down south, where they moved granite blocks weighing tons using rope and prayer. You laugh. She doesn't. In the afternoon, you're assigned to weed the rice fields. Sounds light, but don't forget, you're bent at a strange angle, knee-deep in mud, under a blazing sun, next to a cow giving you a look that says, "You better not eat my lunch." Your hands are coated in dung, your feet are leech magnets, and your back makes an unsettling pop every time you try to stand. A gang of kids drives a flock of ducks past you. They're laughing loudly. One throws a mud ball at you for no reason. You glare at him, tempted to teach him a lesson, until you realize he's the nephew of the labor chief. You swallow your rage along with some mud that splashed into your mouth. Historians still debate whether the pyramid builders were enslaved or paid workers earning bread and beer. Some claim they were treated well, had proper shifts, and even medical care. Others insist, if you're grinding your teeth to nubs on gritty bread and dying from heat stroke while dragging stones, no wage is good enough. You don't need to argue. You're living proof. Your back hurts, your vision blurs, and you've started talking to a rock as if it might understand your pain. Late in the afternoon, you're given a special assignment. Help transport a small stone statue from the temple to the river. Small means fridge-sized. If the fridge were made of sandstone and weighed as much as a full-grown camel. You and 3 others carry it using a wooden pole, muttering prayers that Sobek doesn't decide to open a sinkhole beneath your feet. A loud crack echoes. You think it's the pole. It's not. It's your knee. At last, when the sun slips behind the hills, you return home. No hot water, no massage chair. Just a bucket of still water and a dim corner where you can groan at the neighbor's cat. You collapse onto a straw mat. Your body aches. Limbs feel disconnected. But strangely, you're still alive. You've worked all day like a tiny cog in the vast Egyptian machine, and you haven't died. And you know tomorrow will begin just the same. You can only hope that tomorrow it's cloudy. You want to complain, truly. After a day scorched from skull to toenail, your tooth chipped by bread, and your hip nearly dislocated by a falling stone. You want to sigh, grumble a little, maybe even mutter, "Keep this up, and I'll be dead by 30. But you don't dare. Because this is ancient Egypt, and in ancient Egypt, there's one thing you learn as early as your first bite of sandy bread. Never complain. Not because everyone's an optimist, but because the pharaoh might be listening. You see, the pharaoh isn't just a king. He's a god, a living deity, a sacred figure on par with Horus, backed by Ra, and wielding power far greater than your mortal life. Complain about your circumstances? That's insulting a god. That kind of talk, depending on who hears it, could count as blasphemy, and the punishment ranges from a beating to being sent to build pyramids with no lunch breaks. So, you learn the art of silent suffering. Out loud, you nod. What an honor it is to devote today's labor to our divine ruler. Inside, you're cursing the third stone from the right that twisted your ankle at sunrise. You meet a man named Tepi, over 60, still grinding grain daily. He tells you that in his youth, he once called a foreman short and loud like a hungry god. 2 days later, he was reassigned to a distant border post, filled with snakes, dust, and the rumor that everyone sent there becomes someone who prefers silence. Since then, he nods, smiles, and pats others on the back when sharing the pain. You imitate him. His sorrowful smile becomes a model. Historians still debate whether ancient Egyptians truly believed the pharaoh was divine or if it was a political tool for social control. Some texts show deep reverence, long rituals to celebrate when the pharaoh sneezed, but others include side notes etched into tomb walls, left by stoneworkers saying things like, "The pharaoh didn't look at me today, a lucky day." You hear a tale. A potter once dropped a pharaoh statue during firing. Fearing it as an offense against the gods, he voluntarily offered himself 3 years of unpaid labor to atone. You think it's just a joke until you see the kiln marked with his name and the line, "I didn't mean to." You feel a chill, not from the wind, rare in Egypt, but from the realization that every tiny action might be interpreted as sacrilege. One day, you mutter, "The crops are growing slow this year." The person beside you instantly scans the area, then whispers, "That's an insult to Hapi. Watch your tongue." You freeze. It was just a comment about the weather. But no, here even the harvest is divine business. You begin learning the language of euphemism. Instead of "it's so hot," you say, "Ra has blessed us with abundant light today." Instead of "work is exhausting," you nod and say, "A fine day to offer all one's sweat to the great king." The person beside you nods in agreement, though their eyes are sunken, and sweat pours off them like a waterfall. You notice even the children learn this. A little girl falls. Instead of crying, she stands up and says, "Sobek must be testing my patience today." And you? You just got your foot smashed by a water jar, but you grit your teeth and say, "The gods must be guiding me to strengthen my bones." This reverent silence spreads everywhere, from the fields to the quarries, the bakeries to the riverbanks. Every word is weighed, every frown could be misread, and every frustration must be swallowed into the liver. You're not sure how long you can endure, but you know one thing. To survive in ancient Egypt, you must master the art of internal complaining and external smiling. And you learn quickly, because in the land of the gods, you are constantly being watched. Sand. 3 harmless-looking letters, but in ancient Egypt, you don't just know sand, you coexist with it, sleep with it, and even consider using it as sauce if things get desperate enough. You step out of your house in the morning and there it is, clinging to your feet, sticking to your knees, grinding between your toes as if whispering, "We're never leaving each other." You brush it off. It returns in 5 seconds. Sand never gives up. It's the most toxic relationship you've ever had. You start to feel it everywhere. In your hair, even with a head wrap. In your food bowl, even with a lid. In your bed, under your mat, inside your straw pillow. Anywhere you want peace, sand has already arrived and set up camp. You bite into bread, crunch, not a topping. Real sand. It may have come from grinding grain on stone, letting extra minerals join the party. Maybe the bread sat in the basket too long and dust joined in. Or perhaps you gave up on the unexpected crunch concept several lifetimes ago. Beer? Not spared. You sip, chew a little, and feel the grit thanks to stray barley. You glance into the cup. Something sparkles. Not gold, just sand. Sand mockingly catching the sunlight. Close your eyes, drink anyway, and tell yourself, sand is a mineral. Minerals are good for bones. Then remember your teeth are wearing down like river rocks. You plow a field. The wind rises. A cloud of dust swirls toward you like the god Seth throwing a tantrum. You duck and wrap your cloth tighter, only to realize that some sand has already worked its way into your nose, mouth, eyes, and ears. Every crevice your body would prefer remains private. Your neighbor says sand is just part of life. If you can't handle sand in Egypt, you'll suffer everywhere else too. He scoops some into an incense jar and says, "It's sacred." You nod, trying not to let your tongue scrape the grain that snuck in during your last breath. Modern historians still debate whether sand contributed to the extreme dental erosion in ancient Egyptians. Evidence from mummies shows that most had heavily worn teeth, many even losing them before age. You feel it every time you grind your teeth in your sleep, and hear that familiar scratchy crunch. You try rinsing your mouth. Mistake, the water has sand too. And if you've never swallowed a spoonful of barley soup with a side of fine grit, you know nothing about Egyptian cuisine. You come home and shake out your clothes. A pile of sand falls like an offering to the earth god. You remove your head wrap. More sand. You shake out your sleeping mat. Sand bursts like fireworks. You consider complaining, but remember Section 5's advice, so smile lightly. The god Set has a sense of humor today. Children play with sand, of course. They toss it into the air and rub it on each other's faces like a sacred blessing. You try teaching them not to get it into the water jars. They nod, then do it again. You give up. You once thought your greatest enemy was the weather, the workload, or maybe that crocodile at the riverbank. But no, sand is the final boss. It doesn't shout, it doesn't bite, it simply exists, always. A silent weapon, patient, persistent. At night you lie on your mat and try to breathe calmly. Your nose is still stuffed from the midday dust storm. Your eyes close, but your eyelids feel freshly exfoliated. A grain of sand falls from your hair right into the corner of your mouth. You don't brush it away. You sigh. You smile softly. Sand wins. Ancient Egyptian fashion may look elegant on temple walls. White linen, flowing sheer robes, slim figures glowing under golden sunlight. But when you're the one wearing it, in mid-July Egypt with sand blowing sideways and flies determined to explore every inch of fabric, you realize the truth. Fashion here isn't about showing off your silhouette. It's about testing the limits of human skin. You start your day by wrapping a strip of linen around your waist. Not the silky Italian kind you see in movies. This is coarse linen, hand-woven from flax, sun-dried, scrubbed by sand, and aged in dust from granaries to market stalls. As you wrap it around your body, you don't feel cool. You feel like you just sent out invitations to 300 bugs to come hang out. First issue, it's too thin. If you stand against the sunlight, everyone behind you knows how deeply you believe in minimalist undergarments. Not that you had a choice. Underwear wasn't every day here. Ancient Egyptians believed in keeping the body well ventilated. You feel exposed. You drape another cloth over your shoulder, hoping for extra coverage, but the hot wind immediately lifts it like a flag that reads, "Fresh skin here. Insects welcome." You haven't walked 10 steps before 3 flies, 2 mosquitoes, and 1 unidentifiable bug already have a party on your shoulder. You stomp your feet to shoo them. Mistake. You're barefoot. Most commoners go without shoes or wear flimsy sandals made from palm fibers. Soles thinner than your faith in hygiene. You step on hot rocks, broken bricks, dry goat poop, and thorny weeds. Every step is a new survival lesson. Historians still debate whether ancient Egyptians went barefoot out of convenience, poverty, or personal choice. Some paintings show nobles with designated sandals and servants carrying them so they don't get dirty. But you? Your team, dirty feet. If the Egyptian gods are watching, would your unity with nature touch them or laugh and ask, is that cloth meant for wearing or dishwashing? You try innovating by tying fabric around your ankles, but it slips off in 5 minutes due to sweat. You attempt to maintain dignity, but the wind lifts your tunic, making you look like a wilted paper kite trying to stay majestic. An older woman shows you how to rub a mix of castor oil and leaf ash on your skin to repel mosquitoes. You try it. The result? The smell is so pungent even the mosquitoes flee. A small, greasy victory. The children run around shirtless, filthy, and free, as if the weather doesn't exist. You're jealous, but you're an adult. You must wear clothes, even when they cling to your body like a humid curse. At noon, you try to adjust your sweat-soaked garment while sitting. You tug a bit, and accidentally expose more than you meant to. You sigh, stand quickly, and walk off like you're urgently needed elsewhere. A man watches you go and chuckles. Thin linen is a blessing from the goddess Nephthys. You don't know whether to laugh or hide. That night, when you get home, you take off your tunic and wring out half a bowl of sweat. The linen has changed color. You shake it, and a dust cloud bursts like holiday fireworks. You look into your bronze mirror and see a person with sunken eyes, red shoulders, and a few suspicious bug scratches. You quietly wish you were allowed to wear Roman bronze armor. But no. You're an ancient Egyptian, and your fashion is a mix of heat defense, insect avoidance, and unlimited tolerance for rough fabric and relentless sunlight. You lie down on your straw mat, back stuck to straw, linen stuck to your back, and whisper, "At least I'm not completely sunburned. Tomorrow you'll wear it again. Of course. It's the only outfit you own. And the gods don't take size exchange requests. From the moment you open your eyes to the second you collapse onto a straw mat at night, you don't live as an independent individual. You exist as a tiny component in a vast spiritual ecosystem so sprawling that you're never quite sure if you just ate breakfast or committed a crime. In ancient Egypt, everything you did was tied to the gods. You sneeze, pray for Ptah's forgiveness. You trip, Seth is probably testing you. Do you forget to greet the sun when you wake? Oh no, you've just offended Ra himself. Religion here isn't something people remember on Sundays. It's the air you breathe, the ground you walk, the bloodstream of society. You don't eat without offering. You don't sleep without praying. And you don't spit randomly, because for all you know, you just launched phlegm onto an ancestor's wandering soul. This morning, you were about to sneak a bite of leftover bread, but your elderly neighbor gasped, "Haven't you offered the first piece to your ancestors?" You froze mid-bite. Luckily, you managed to chew in reverse and muttered a quick apology prayer. She nodded, satisfied though your stomach remained empty. You learned to keep short prayers ready for every situation. Stub your toe? Thank you, Geb, for teaching me steadiness. Bee sting? Oh, Isis, grant me resilience. A cat staring too long? Blessed Bestet, I didn't steal anyone's fish, I swear. You used to think farming was just labor, but no. Before sowing, you must pray to Happy so the Nile won't wash away the entire season. As crops grow, you hang charms to ward off evil spirits. At harvest, the first portion must be offered to the grain deity. One day you pull up seedlings too roughly, and the labor overseer hisses, "Easy, this soil might be someone's grandmother's resting place." You nod furiously. From then on, every movement feels like touching a divine cheek. Modern historians still debate whether ancient Egyptians believed in these rituals or followed social expectations. Some sources suggest people feared punishment or accusations of impiety. But when you watch a man stop under the blazing sun to bow to a carved deity on a rock wall, you understand that belief or habit is strong enough that no one dares break it. You once asked a stonemason why he never eats with his left hand. He said, "Left is for purification rites. Eating with it insults Sobek." You nodded and dared not ask further. He held a chisel in his right hand. You also learned that every god manages a particular to-do list. Got a cold? That's Serket. Can't sleep? That's your guy. Lost your way at night? I forgot to ask Khonsu, patron of moonlit journeys. Slip and tear your tunic? Maybe I forgot to thank Shu for yesterday's breeze. You even begin muttering apologies reflexively. Stepped in goat poop? I know I must be more mindful. Banged your shin on a water jar? May the jar spirit spare my bones. Bumped into someone? May the gods reconcile our souls. They haven't even scowled yet. You're already done with 3 rounds of atonement. Once, you coughed in front of a Hempel statue. Before you could say a word, a child handed you a mint leaf and whispered, "Suck on this, don't upset the god." You obeyed. At night, you light incense. Not because you like the smell, but because it's your ritual duty. Offering it at sundown to wish for a peaceful night. You watch the smoke curl and mumble words you no longer fully understand, only that they must be spoken. You lie down on your mat, hands folded over your chest, and whisper a thank you to Hathor for sparing you from heatstroke today. You know you'll never remember all 2,000 gods in the Egyptian pantheon, but you try to remember at least 10 that deal with sleep. Because, who knows, if you forget to greet them tonight, you might wake up to find a snake in your sandal. a divine reminder that sleep without prayer is not safe to sleep. You breathe deeply, and in your heart you understand. You are no longer a free soul living on your terms. You are one breath in a vast, sacred universe, and every breath must be blessed, offered, and permitted. Do you think your boss is strict? Try working for someone who's not only a king but also considered a living god. Someone who holds power not just over your job and your property, but possibly your afterlife. Meet the Pharaoh, the only boss you're required to bow to, offer tributes to, and sing praises to, even if he hasn't sneezed once today. Whether you're a farmer, a brickmaker, or a stone haulier, it doesn't matter. Whoever you are, everything you touch, walk on, eat, or sleep with belongs to the Pharaoh. Not metaphorically, legally. The land? His. The harvest? His. The sandals on your feet? Technically, it's his. You're just borrowing them. You hear the people call him titles like Son of Ra, Lord of the Two Lands, or the Great Prince who rules with a whisper. But you know, beneath all that glowing language, the message is crystal clear. Do not complain. Yesterday, you heard someone was arrested for grumbling about rising bread prices. It offended the economy. Not because bread comes from royal grain. Complaining equals criticizing Pharaoh's system. The result? That man was invited to reflect in silence by working somewhere remote and dusty. Once you walked past a statue of the Pharaoh in the public square. A child accidentally threw a rock and chipped its foot. The entire family had to bring offerings to the temple for 3 days. You now silently pray not to sneeze near a statue, in case it's interpreted as disrespectful wind generation. Modern historians still debate just how mighty the Pharaoh was. Some argue he was the epicenter of everything: king, the general, high priest, and divine spokesperson. Others say the real power was in the hands of bureaucrats, and Pharaoh was just a symbol. You don't care who's in charge, because you have no say either way. You once joined a royal procession, not because you were important, but because you were the guy pulling the cart with the golden statue. Every 20 steps, you had to kneel, raise your hands, and shout, "Long live the Pharaoh!" even as sweat poured down your face and the donkey ahead of you farted straight into your soul. You saw a stoneworker once draw a tiny smiley face under a brick intended for a Pharaoh statue. 3 days later, he disappeared. No one spoke of it. Only a hastily carved message behind the wall remained. Silence is respect. You start bowing instinctively. See someone in golden robes? Bow. Hear ceremonial music? Bow. Smell incense? Bow. Once you bowed so hard, you smacked your forehead on a stone column. Someone patted your back and said, "Ra bless your enthusiasm." You once dreamed that you shouted at Pharaoh that you wanted a vacation. You woke up in a cold sweat, dropped to your knees, and begged Anubis for forgiveness for your disrespectful dream. You heard of a man who wrote a 112-line poem praising the Pharaoh because he didn't get punished after spilling wine during a ritual. The poem celebrated his mercy shining like a second sun. You're not sure if it helped him keep his job, but the wine jar didn't survive. From that point on, you choose your words very carefully. Instead of "it's so hot," you say, "the Pharaoh's radiance is strong today." Instead of "I'm hungry," you say, "my stomach humbly awaits the grace of the court." Instead of "I need a break," you say, "I remain ready to serve, should the gods allow it." You survive on silence, practice deference, and your knees are always ready to drop. You don't complain. Not because you don't want to, but because even wanting to is risky. And when you lie down at night, staring at the clay ceiling, you whisper, "May the Pharaoh sleep peacefully tonight." Not because you care about his dreams, but if he loses sleep, you might lose your head. You think it's just indigestion, maybe from that slightly stale bread this morning, the not-so-fresh beer, or because yesterday you swallowed a whole date seed to avoid spitting it out. But when the stomach cramps hit for the 3rd time in a single hour, panic sets in. You grimace, double over, and wonder, is this a sign that the god Sobek is displeased, or did I just swallow a live worm? In ancient Egypt, when your body revolts in such a painfully convincing way, you don't go to a hospital. You go to a show. A healer who's part doctor, part sorcerer, part priest. Someone who might heal you, or convince you that you're being healed. Then leave it to faith to finish the job. You're led to an older man holding a bundle of papyrus scrolls and a tiny bronze blade. He doesn't ask where it hurts. He asks, "What did you dream last night?" You try to remember. You think a cat was chasing you. He nods gravely. "A bad omen," he says. "Could be a wandering spirit following the cat." You're told to lie down on a reed mat. He burns some fragrant resin, waving the smoke around while muttering a ritual chant so long you almost forget you're in pain. Then he mixes a brown powder made from crushed roots and something that smells like dried onions and rotting wood and smears it across your belly. It's warm, then hot, then burning. You try to sit up in protest, but he shoves a tiny bronze amulet into your palm and says, "Hold this. Don't let go until after your bowels move." You nod. Then, he shivers as he smears a dab of honey directly onto your forehead. You think, "This is the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me." But then you remember someone yesterday got cured by swallowing papyrus scrolls with reverse sun incantations written on them. Archaeologists have found hundreds of ancient Egyptian medical texts that combine practical remedies with deep spirituality. Honey mixed with salt for infections, roasted mouse flesh for snake bites, even a cure involving listening to drums for 3 days to expel evil spirits from the ears. You're not sure what the science says, but after 20 minutes, the pain subsides. Maybe it's a placebo. Perhaps you're just too confused to remember the cramps. Either way, you feel better. You thank the healer. He nods, draws a tiny symbol on your hand in black ink, and says it will keep your intestines in a straight path. You smile. You have no idea what that means, and you don't ask. You watch as a woman brings her feverish child for treatment. The healer places his hand on the child's forehead, mutters something you don't understand, and then hands the mother a small, round lump of clay. Place this under the pillow for 3 nights, then throw it into the river. You sniff the lump. It smells like mint, or maybe cow dung. You leave the hut with a strange feeling, skeptical and hopeful, but your stomach is calmed, and whether it was the charm, the honey, or sheer fear that kept you from eating anything else, you don't care. You survived for now. That night you hang the amulet above your bed, not because you fear the pain returning, but because you now believe that without it, things might go wrong. You lie down, hand resting on your now peaceful belly, and you think, maybe, in this world, magic is just another name for belief. You dream again. The cat returns, but this time, it just sits quietly and licks its paw. You smile. Tomorrow morning you'll tell the healer. Maybe it means you're healing. You return home after a long day of sun, dust, and enough spiritual rituals to qualify as a miniature divine expo. You hope that, at the very least, your humble dwelling will be a place of peace, coolness, and rest, like a cozy cave where you can stretch your legs, scratch your back, and not have to care about the temperature of the air. But no, your house is hotter than Ray's birthday party. It's made of mud brick, which sounds rustic, eco-friendly, and charming. But in reality, living inside a sun-baked box of dried mud is like sleeping in a breathing kiln. Each wall stores heat like a camel, holds grudges, and then releases it right when you need rest the most. At night, you open the creaky wooden door. The air inside is thick, like a pot of onion soup left out for 3 days. It smells somewhere between ancient sweat and mysteriously marinated dried fish. Dust clings to every sliver of your tiny windows, just enough light to let you know you're sweating. You sit on a chair. It creaks in solidarity. A fly buzzes by, then 10. Then, a family line has lived here since the previous dynasty. You wave your hand to fan yourself. Mistake. The air current dries your sweat just enough to stir the fine dust into a layer of what might be called domestic mineral outerwear. You peek out the window, hoping for a breeze. Outside's no better. The palm tree by your house is shedding leaves out of sheer despair. Shade? Yes. At 5 a.m., for precisely 18 minutes. After that, sunlight returns to dominate every surface like an army of merciless fire. You climb to the roof, hoping it'll be cooler. Ancient Egyptians often slept on flat rooftops during summer nights because the indoors were suffocating. But tonight, the wind isn't calm. It brings sand, dust, and a few leaves that gave up on life. You lie down. The packed earth rooftop still warm, like a heating pad with no off switch. You turn. A bug crawls across your back. You sigh and stay still. Sudden movements might disturb the one dust-free patch you cleared to lie on. Once, you visited the home of a temple scribe. His house had 2 stories, whitewashed walls, plastered surfaces, and a window that faced the river. You nearly died of envy. "The upper floor is for sleeping," he said. "It's cooler." You didn't dare ask what he did to earn such luxury. Your house is good enough if it lets you crawl inside and not die. That's already a blessing. You remember one night when it got so hot that you dreamed you were baking a loaf of bread. You woke not from the dream, but because you'd rolled into the wall, still radiating heat from the day, and headbutted it. Historians say ancient Egyptian homes were efficient for the climate. Thick walls, narrow windows, and shade-conscious design. But those historians never lived in one during summer, after 3 days of stomach cramps, a week of sandy bread, and 21 nosefly encounters. You try lighting incense to drive away mosquitoes. Doesn't work. The mosquitoes treat it like a buffet invitation. You drape a wet cloth over your face and pray to fall asleep before the itch reaches your soul. You don't have a pillow. Egyptian pillows were wooden or stone headrests, meant to keep your head raised and your hairstyle intact. You tried one once. Woke up with your neck twisted like a goose, contemplating the meaning of life. Since then, you have chosen to sleep ugly and survive longer. You lie there surrounded by dust, sweat, and a strange noise from the corner of your house. Maybe a mouse or a tiny lost spirit moving in. Whatever it is, you don't have the energy to care. A home is a place to exist, not a place to enjoy. You breathe deep. It's hot, but it's quiet. At least you know this roof will still be over your head tomorrow. And if you're lucky, the flies will let you sleep until the sun god returns with his daily frying pan. You open your eyes. The sky isn't fully light yet. Even the chickens are still half asleep. But you're already up, because you are a woman in ancient Egypt. There's no such thing as time off. There is only the schedule, a sacred inheritance passed down by gods, men, and 30 generations before you, like a legacy you didn't ask for. First comes grinding grain. Not the push-a-button type. No, it's 2 heavy stones, grinding, rubbing, pressing until barley cracks into flour. And the sand mixed in isn't a flaw, it's destiny. You grind until your shoulders ache, your hands go numb, and your neck vibrates with every pass of stone. One of your children tugs on your dress, asking if there's food yet. You smile through your teeth. When the flour's done, there will be. Next, cooking. You light a fire using dried dung, blowing steadily until the smoke stings your eyes. Bread, onions, porridge beer. It's nutritious if you're not too picky. One hand stirs the pot. The other shows the dog trying to steal from the fire. The house cat is licking the offering bowl on Bastet's altar. You don't dare scold it. No one scolds a sacred cat. You've barely eaten when someone knocks. A pregnant woman in pain. You're not a nurse, but everyone knows. Women deliver women. You rinse your hands with ash, grab the cleanest cloth left, and boil water. You have no gloves, no sterile tools, only experience and hope that Hathor is close today. When the baby is born, you wash it, wrap it, and hush it to sleep. The mother smiles. You smile. But your stomach's empty, your body sore, and the sun is already high. Back home you don't rest. Your child is sick. You crush herbs, mix them with honey, and whisper a prayer. You draw a protection symbol on their forehead, then sing an old lullaby from your grandmother's cracked lips. Afterwards you mend clothes, wash rags, strip fibers, and weave fabric. Each task repeats like a sad, steady drumbeat. You don't complain. You don't have time to. Complaint is also a luxury reserved for those not constantly called upon. Your husband returns from the fields. He's tired, hungry, wants to eat. You serve dinner. No one asks if you've eaten. You're not surprised. Women serve first, eat last, sometimes not at all. Your dinner is whatever's left and a burnt-edged piece of bread. In the evening, you handle the rituals. You sprinkle incense on the ancestor altar, praying for your children's health, a harvest without drought, and a husband who avoids careless curses. You don't pray for yourself. You hope for one whole night of sleep. Historians say ancient Egyptian women could own property, divorce, and even sue, and it's true on paper. Some elite women were priestesses or estate managers, but you are an ordinary woman. Your freedom is boxed in by the fields, the hearth, the children, and the quiet force of custom. You once dreamed of becoming a scribe, but your father said your hands were born to wash cloth, not hold a reed pen. So you folded that dream and tucked it away in a corner with all the other maybes. You once fell in love, truly, with a young potter who had bright eyes, but your family married you to a man with 2 goats and a small plot of land. Love wasn't the deciding factor. Fertility and hard work were gold. You tell yourself you are strong, and you are. You endure nameless aches, faded dreams, and endless duties. You do everything: raise children, keep the fire lit, and quiet the pain in your chest. And when night falls, everyone is asleep. Only then do you sit still, untie your scarf, rub your aching feet, and breathe a long, thin sigh like rising incense smoke. You look at the ink-black sky, not to find stars, but to softly ask, will tomorrow be different from today? No one answers, but you already know. No matter the sky, you will rise early, grind the grain, cook the meal, mend the shirt, deliver the baby, and continue. Because you are a woman. In Egypt, and surviving is a triumph in itself. Do you think ancient beauty routines were just a few neat braids and some scented balm on the forehead? Think again. In ancient Egypt, beauty was a full-time job that required skill, determination, and a willingness to flirt with poison. You start the morning by washing your face with water mixed with herb ash, not for skincare, to chase away lingering spirits from your dreams. Then you dry off with a scrap of linen. It's rough, but you don't dare complain. Sobek, the god known for nitpicking the ungrateful, might be listening. Next comes eyeliner. You take a tiny jar of finely ground black lead mixed with animal fat, a magical concoction known as kohl, worn by everyone. You dip a sharp wooden stick in it and draw a line across your eyelid as sharp as a blade. No mirror, just the reflection in a dull bronze plate. And you hold your breath, one shaky hand, and you'll look like you just lost a fight with a royal cat. They say kohl protects you from the sun, flies, and the evil eye. That might be true, except for the part where lead is poison. But you don't care. Beauty has its price. You pray the flies don't land directly on your freshly lined eyes. Next, you color your lips with red ochre mixed with deer fat, or if you're feeling fancy, crushed beetle wings blended with oil. It smells a bit intense. But the color is stunning, as red as bougainvillea scorched by the sun. A little lip, a petite rouge from powdered redstone, and you're ready to buy onions. You wear no underwear, no one does. Just a linen wrap, tied beneath the chest, sheer as mist. Each step you take is a quiet plea that the breeze behaves. You once thought less clothing meant more comfort. Then sand blew into private places. You reconsidered. You dab on perfume, made from tree resin and lotus oil, stored in a tiny ceramic vial. You apply it behind your ears, on your wrists. The scent is gentle and elegant. It lasts exactly 3 minutes. Then sweat takes over, flies arrive, and you realize that natural body odor is Egypt's true national fragrance. You once got invited to a wedding. It took nearly 2 hours to braid your hair, not because it was long, but because you wanted to weave in 3 colored stones, a leather strand, and a white feather to balance energy. A child asked if you were a priestess or a backup bride. You didn't know how to answer. Historians say ancient Egyptians valued appearance not just for beauty's sake, but because it reflected harmony with the gods. Eyeliner was protection. The perfume was an offering. Tidy hair was a sign of respect for Maat, the goddess of order and balance. You don't leave your hair loose casually. Once, you skipped tying it up, and your husband's aunt looked at you like you were chaos incarnate. You once had a fly land on your freshly painted lips. You screamed. Your lip cracked. It took an hour to reapply. Another day, you finished your beauty routine, stepped outside, and the wind howled. Your skirt flew, hair puffed up, eyeliner smeared. You looked like a goddess who had just survived an explosion. You once tried a miracle cream, white clay mixed with yogurt. Your skin did glow, from mild burning. You stopped using it. But your neighbor still applies it daily, chanting, "I'm glowing from within." You don't argue. You use less. You know beauty here isn't about seduction. It's about showing order, reverence, and a little self-respect. You wear makeup not because you're idle, but because you survive in a society where your appearance is the business card of your soul. You lie down at the end of the day, fingers still stained with lip pigment, eyes stinging from incense smoke. But your heart feels lighter, because at least today, you held yourself together. You dream of being Nefertiti, queen, eternal beauty. Then you wake up scratching your back because of a mosquito. But the smile lingers, because for a brief moment, you looked like a statue, and lived with it. You think that once you die, all the pain ends, that you'll finally rest, dissolve into dust, free from work, flies, and sandy bread forever? Sorry, you're not an ancient Egyptian. Because here, death is only the opening act. You lie down and take your final breath, after a life of grinding grain, working fields, offering rituals, and avoiding offense to sacred cats. You think the curtain has closed. But no, your soul rises, like the main character in a mythological quest, and your afterlife journey begins just like that. You enter the underworld, the Duat. It's no realm of rainbows or soft light. It's a shadowy maze filled with rivers of blood, spell-carved gates, and creatures so strange you don't dare ask their names in case they answer. A guide meets you. Maybe Thoth, the ibis-headed god, clutching a reed pen. He doesn't speak much, just gestures for you to move forward. You walk while murmuring prayers because you know what's coming. The Hall of Judgment. Every act, including yelling at that chicken last week, will be weighed and recorded. Waiting there is Anubis, jackal-headed, eyes unblinking. He stands beside a massive scale. On one side, your heart. On the other, the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. You swallow hard, because suddenly, everything comes back. The time you hid onions in a grain basket. The time you dozed off during flood watch. The time you lied about making an offering when you forgot. Tiny things. Now potentially soul-crushing. You silently pray your heart is light. Not in ounces, but in ethics. Because if your heart weighs more than the feather, you don't move forward. You get eaten by Amit, the soul devourer, part lion, part hippo, part crocodile. She doesn't ask why. She doesn't forgive. She eats. Whole. No chewing. Modern historians call the weighing of the heart one of ancient Egypt's most important moral frameworks, a cosmic court where personal virtue mattered more than status. It wasn't a vague belief. It was a spiritual report card, and you're standing right in the middle of it. Luckily, Anubis is stern but fair. He doesn't scold. He places your heart on the scale. It tips slightly. You hold your breath. Thoth writes it down. Ma'at nods. You exhale. You can enter the field of reeds, Egypt's version of paradise. A new life, but this time with peace. Fertile fields, no floods, no grumpy overseers, no bread tough enough to chip teeth. But you didn't get there by surviving. You got there by living well, by law, by ritual, and most of all, by heart. You remember your mother's words. Live light, child, so when the scale tips, it won't lean toward pain. Back then, you thought she meant digestion. Now you understand. She meant legacy. In a dream, you walk through a gate of golden light that night. No one calls your name. No passport is needed. Just you and the whisper of reeds welcoming you home. You smile. Not because you died, but because you lived right. You think that once you've lived righteously, balanced your heart, and passed the spiritual morality test, like a model student, that's it, right? Wrong. Because even death in ancient Egypt is a journey, laced with danger, lurking with bacteria, tomb robbers, and bald men who might try to resell you. And now, you're about to become a mummy. Not by choice. It's the official protocol to guide your soul into the afterlife, where you'll live eternally, but only if your body is preserved. That's right. Your corpse must be kept intact like a high-grade jar of salted fish. First, your body is taken to the House of Embalming, which looks like a cross between a kitchen, a clinic, and a barbershop. There, a group of professionals will perform a process that, even described, makes your soul wince. Removing your brain through your nose. Not with machines, with a metal hook. Bit by bit. Gently. Wetly. The smell defies words. Next, your abdomen is sliced open. Your organs removed, and each one placed in separate canopic jars. Each jar bears the head of a god. Liver for Imsiti, lungs for Hapi, stomach for Duamutef, and intestines for Kebesenuif. You can't remember who's who, but it's fine as long as nobody drops one. Your body is then stuffed with resin, sprinkled with natron salt, and left to dry for 40 days. Meanwhile, your family weeps, chants prayers, and occasionally argues over funeral expenses. Because mummification is expensive, even the budget version for commoners might involve tossing you in salt and hoping for the best. Once your body dries up like a sacred beef jerky, it's wrapped in linen. Many layers. Each layer is a prayer, a protective charm, or a desperate attempt to keep your arm from snapping off. Then you're placed in a coffin. If you're wealthy, a wooden sarcophagus is painted, carved, or even gilded. Suppose you're not, a clay box. But the goal is the same. Protect your body from grave robbers. Yes, grave robbers. The ones who don't believe in souls fear no gods and care only for gold, jewels, perfume, linen, and your corpse. Do you think you'll rest in peace in a tomb? Think again. Many were dug up just days after burial. Performance. There are recorded cases of tombs being robbed 4 times in 1 month. Robbers were fast, and the first thing they'd toss out? The mummy. Some were even decapitated and sold as decorative pieces. Some mummies were burned for mummy oil, they called it. Horrific? Yes. True? Also yes. Later, Romans ground mummies into powder to use as medicine. Aubers the ploying congratulations. You're now a posthumous dietary supplement. Historians still debate how widespread tomb robbing was, whether it was rare or rampant during unstable times. Either way, peace was not guaranteed, unless your family had the funds to hire tomb guards or build your grave in an absurdly hard-to-find location. You hear tales of people reusing old mummy wrappings because they couldn't afford new linen, the ancient version of thrifted that no one wants. There are even legends of the living being forced to lie inside tomb niches, pretending to be mummies to fool looters, a job with serious risks. So when your family builds your tomb, they aim for subtlety. Nothing too large, too ornate, or too visible. Because what you want most now is quiet, not gold, not praise, not a giant statue with your name. Just not to be dug up at midnight by someone holding an oil lamp saying, "Hey, this one still has skin." That night, your soul floats above as your body is lowered into the grave. You whisper to the gods, "Please, let me rest, for real." No one answers. But the wind stills. The sand does not shift. And you hope this time, sleep means sleep. You've grown used to living among gods. You've learned to walk softly, speak gently, bow at the right angle, and pray to the correct deity. But you didn't expect that religion isn't just a belief in ancient Egypt. It's a behavioral operating system that governs everything you do, including sneezing, eating, and even going to sleep. Before you eat anything at dawn, you must offer the first bite to your ancestors. There's no chewing on a hunk of bread while muttering a half-hearted prayer. The gods see everything. The ancestors hear everything. Forget the offering, and if your bread falls on the ground, don't ask why. Every meal begins with a simple invocation. May the gods protect today's food. No one touches a thing until someone whispers that line. People believe that an unblessed meal invites misfortune, And you do not want Sobek crashing your lunch, especially when he's got a crocodile head and an infinite appetite. When leaving the house, you tap the carved image of your household's protective deity beside the doorframe and sketch a quick hieroglyph in the air, a kind of sacred fingerprint to ask permission to go outside without attracting wandering spirits. Forget to do it? Sorry, you'll stub your toe and drop your basket of onions into a ditch. Passing a temple? Look up and nod. Hear ritual music in the distance. Stop and bow for a moment. Every small event is part of your spiritual attendance record. You're not the protagonist of the world. You're a humble extra in a mythological epic that's been running for millennia. Back home, you don't just call the healer if someone's sick. You burn incense, apply amulets, wear protective stones, soak your feet in sacred herb water, and recite a healing spell as long as a hymn. If you forget a verse, start over. Spirits don't tolerate laziness. Modern historians believe ancient Egyptian religion didn't exist alongside daily life. It was embedded in it. You don't attend rituals on special occasions. You live inside the rituals. Every gesture has a sacred echo from the moment you open your eyes until you close them again. You wear a small amulet around your neck, the Eye of Horus. Every morning you touch it 3 times, once for peace, once to ward off bad luck, and once because you're too afraid to skip the 3rd tap. At night, you can't sleep without praying. Even if your eyes are heavy, your back aches, and your knees feel like they've turned to limestone, you still whisper to Anubis, asking him to guard your dreams from demons. One time, you fell asleep without doing it. The next morning, one of your chickens was dead. Coincidence? Omen? You're not sure. But you never skipped it again. You once tried skipping your rituals for a day. Too busy. No morning offering, no temple salute, no blessing at the fire. What happened? Your bread burned. You tripped on the stairs. You stubbed your toe on the water jar. The house cat, usually indifferent, scratched you and stared like Bastet herself had sent her on a disciplinary mission. You realized that "it's probably fine" doesn't exist here. Every forgotten prayer is a potential transgression. If not against the gods, then against the sharp glare of the old lady next door. One day it rained, a rare gift. People poured into the street, kneeling in gratitude. Children squealed, incense was lit, and everyone murmured blessings. You saw an older man raise his hands to the sky, eyes closed, reciting ancient words. He wasn't putting on a show. He didn't know how else to live. You understood that in ancient Egypt, belief didn't stem from force. It comes from habit, from fear of the unseen, from the desire to do right, even when unsure what right truly is. And so, when you lie down at the end of the day, you whisper to yourself, "Thank you, gods, for nothing terrible happening today." Or, at least, not yet. And then, you sleep. Not because you're tired, but because you've completed every ritual. You once thought learning to read was about matching sounds to meanings and stringing them into words, like a paper-based puzzle game. But when you held a piece of Egyptian papyrus and stared at the rows of hieroglyphs, with birds, snakes, eyes, reeds, lotuses, and what looked like a beetle doing yoga, you suddenly realized, this isn't reading, this is learning a spiritual matrix. Writing in ancient Egypt wasn't just for communication, it was magic, a living force. Every symbol carried sacred energy connected to the gods, cosmic order, and the souls of the dead. Misspell someone's name? That's not just a typo. That's a risk of erasing their soul from eternity. You didn't mishear that. The ancient Egyptians believed a person's name contained their eternal essence. If their name was erased from a tomb, their soul couldn't be reborn. No afterlife, no heavenly fields, just sand, forever. You once saw a destroyed tomb, not looted for gold, but chiseled clean of every character bearing the owner's name. The cemetery keeper whispered, "That's the ultimate punishment, the second death." That's why scribes who could write were nearly as revered as priests. They didn't just write contracts or records, they transcribed destinies. One stroke of their brush could grant life, or seal a soul's end. You once tried learning a few glyphs. I started with something simple, cat. Sounds easy. But to write it, you had to draw the cat at the correct angle. Add the phonetic glyphs for mu, and finish with a classifier symbol for living creatures. The direction of the writing matters. Write it backwards, and suddenly it says, "Fox eats cat," instead of "cat eats fish." Modern historians have identified over 700 hieroglyphs in the classic system. Some scribes studied their whole lives and never mastered them all. Those who could write the pharaoh's full name and title were ancient rock stars. You once met an older man who wrote inscriptions for the temple. He drew characters on the wall while muttering like he was casting a spell. You asked what he was writing. He said, "The name of the god Sobek," then added, "Carefully. If I get it wrong, the crocodile god might be angry." You nodded and asked no further. You heard a tale about an apprentice who misspelt the pharaoh's wife's name. Her name was Neferu, meaning the beautiful one. He wrote Nefru, meaning the well. They say he disappeared from court records, and rumor has it his tomb bore no name. You suddenly understood why tombs were carved with such obsessive precision. People spent months getting every glyph right. You once saw a stonecutter cry after carving the wrong symbol in his father's name, and he paid to replace the entire stone. Some abused this power. They deliberately erased enemies' names from records, reducing them to the nameless, a permanent death. It's worse than dying. It was never having existed. You stepped back and looked up at a wall covered in hieroglyphs. A line snaked past lotuses, crawled through birds, and touched the rising sun. You didn't understand the meaning, but you felt the weight. Each glyph seemed to breathe, alive and guarding a piece of the world's soul. That night, you went home, picked up a clay brick, and used a reed brush dipped in black ink to write your name. Carefully, stroke by stroke. It wasn't beautiful, but it was yours, proof that you were here. You placed the brick beside your bed, under the oil lamp's glow, and you slept with a quiet heart. Because even after you're gone, your name remains. You're only 5 years old. In theory, you're still a child. But in ancient Egypt, childhood was a luxury, if not an outright myth. There were no plastic toys, kindergartens, or time for freely exploring your personal feelings. Instead, you woke up before the sun even scratched its eyes open, summoned by your mother, not for milk, but to carry water from the Nile. A simple task, but rich with survival instincts. You go with your older sister, clay jar in hand, feet pressing into sand still damp with dew. You wade toward the riverbank, slippery from thrashing fish and leftover cow dung from the herd that passed earlier. The Nile looks calm, but hides dangers like a grumpy neighbor. Today, the water is peaceful. Today, you'll see a lazy crocodile pretending to nap in the reeds. You learn caution, how to toss pebbles ahead before stepping, listen to the splash of water to know what's moving beneath. No one teaches you this from books. You learn with your eyes, your feet, and stories of death passed down in whispers. Back home, there's no rest. You're assigned to thresh grain, grind flour, mix clay, or if lucky, to chase chickens and clean up donkey droppings. Your mother says, if your hands still move and your eyes still open, you can work. Complain? No. You don't want to discover how fast her hand moves when she swings a switch. Your friends are the same. One trails their father into the fields, caked in mud, to learn how to plant seeds in straight rows. Another weaves mats, each mistake punished with a snap to the ear. You learn to accept it. Because here, if you don't work, you're a burden. To Felding of services, need over the north and mothers, in really act, lodging, Downnoa, in Shidla, Interio, Stablegging, you're in banishment. You've heard rich kids go to school, learning letters, numbers, writing. But that's a rare privilege. You know, by eavesdropping on adults, piecing meaning from curse words and tracing hieroglyphs in the sand, until the wind erases them. You once dreamed of riding a horse, galloping through reeds like a prince. But when you woke up, you were hugging a water jar, standing next to a smoking fire pit, and flies had claimed your neck as a landing strip. Games? Of course. You play with dirt, sticks, and pebbles. You blow bubbles using river water and lotus leaves. You twist straw into fake snakes to scare your little brother. But these games are squeezed between chores, not official break time. You're not allowed to be fragile, even if you get bitten by a snake. One of the kids in your village did it while gathering firewood. Adults held him down, cut the wound, packed it with strange powder, and said, if he survives till morning, Anubis will grant him another chance. You're not sure if he made it, but you learn never to stick your hand into the bushes. Ever again. You heard of a prince who once trained to understand the people by living in a straw hut. You don't know what the people really mean, but you do know straw huts have mosquitoes, and if the wind's too strong, the walls can fall on your face. Modern historians love to say that Egyptian children grew up independent, agile, and close to nature. They forget that nature here includes snakes, scorpions, and crocodiles. Getting too close to nature can sometimes mean getting too close to death. At night, you're told stories, not magical fairy tales, but things like, once a child woke up late and was starved for 2 days to learn a lesson. You shiver, not from fear, but because you forgot to cover the water jar this morning. You lie on your mat. Your skin is sticky with dried sweat. Your hands are still dusted with grain powder. You turn toward your little brother. He's already asleep, clutching a doll made of straw. You don't have a doll. You have a small wooden stick carved with your name. Rough, but it's yours. You close your eyes. Sleep so you can wake up early tomorrow. Because you're a child, but you're also a laborer. In Egypt, childhood wasn't a time to discover yourself. It was training for how not to die too soon. You once thought you were the apex of the food chain, that you were human, a child of the gods, gifted with language and intellect by heaven and earth. Sorry. In ancient Egypt, you're just the stage floor for the one creature that ruled without a crown, the fly. They arrive, uninvited. Stay without fear, leave without regret, and return with the entire family. At dawn, you open your eyes, barely exhale, and a fly is already perched on your eyebrow. Then one lands on your lip. You wave it away. It scoffs. You blow. It tilts and lands again as if daring you to keep playing. You light the cooking fire. Smoke billows thick into the air. Your eyes sting, your nose runs, your cat flees. But the flies? Still there. One sits on your bread. Another circles the water jug. A third dances merrily on the onion jar lid. You don't understand their biology, but clearly, smoke is a seasoning, not a repellent. You work in the fields. It's 38 degrees Celsius. Your skin scorches, your shirt sticks to your back, and sweat pours like little ponds across your body. A buffet for flies. You count. 6 on your arm, 3 on your neck, at least 2 orbiting your eyes, doing a ring dance to cosmic music. You pass a woman harvesting greens. Her hair is tied with leather, her face stern. Yet her nostrils flare with every fly landing. She doesn't bother swatting. Pointless, she says. They're minor gods, raised by Seth. You're unsure if she's right, but doubt begins to creep in. You apply perfume, not to attract, but to create a scent barrier. Result? More flies. Turns out they love lotus oil. You mix it with clay. No change. You try ash. Worse. You begin to understand that flies are not avoidable, only endurable. You once scraped your knee carrying water. The wound barely formed when the flies arrived. Not one, but a legion. After bandaging it, you noticed the gauze tremble. You checked. Not wind, just a fly meeting. You'd heard elders say, if a fly lands on a statue, it means the god is angry. You silently thought, then the gods must be furious 24/7. You've never seen a fly-free statue. Modern historians say flies weren't just a hygiene problem, they were part of the religious ecosystem. Some temples even carved fly symbols onto medals to honor bravery. Yes, you read that right. Anyone who made it through a workday swarmed by flies and stayed sane deserved a medal. You once saw an older woman playing a reed flute to ward them off. It didn't work, but the sound gave hope. Children competed to swat flies. Kill 3 with one hand and you're dubbed a dust warrior. One girl smacked a fly the size of her thumb and was called Daughter of Hapi for a week. You crawl indoors, shut the door, and burn incense at night. You pray the flies won't follow. You're wrong. One's already hiding in your blanket. 2 others are sipping your sweat like aged wine. You wrap your head, groaning. They still find their way to your ears. You once dreamed you became a fly, soaring over pyramids, perching on the Sphinx's shoulder, victorious. You awoke drenched, not from the nightmare, but from the real fly lounging on your cheek. You lie down, swatting once more. Miss, the fly's still there, and you whisper, "Fine, I guess you're my roommate now." Because if you can't beat them, at least learn to live with the swarm like a true Egyptian. After a week of back-breaking labor, sand scraping your skin, flies biting your face, and gods staring at you from every wall, you wonder. So how did ancient Egyptians have fun? You could have fun if you were still alive, had teeth left to laugh, and weren't currently fleeing a crocodile, but with conditions. Condition 1. The work had to be finished. No one danced or sang with an empty stomach or dung-stained hands fresh from the fields. You earned the right to enjoy yourself only after submitting your grain quota, hauling enough stone, and not burning the beer fire even once that week. Condition 2. The weather couldn't be too hot, which, as you know, it always was. But let's suppose today was somehow a miracle. Your chores are done, you survived, and you still have energy left to smile. Then congratulations, you're eligible for some delightfully practical entertainment. You see a group gathered under a tree, one of the 3 left in the village. They split into 2 teams, each holding wooden sticks. They're playing a game called throwing sticks, precisely what it sounds like, until one comes flying past your ear and nearly makes you curse in front of the elders. The game's like ancient bowling, minus the ball and the safety rules. Hit the target, and the crowd cheers. Miss and hit the village chief's chicken? You don't want to know what happens next. Kids are playing Chasing Seth, a game of tag where one unlucky kid plays the chaos god and gets banished from the field. Once, a boy got too into character, was tied up and left in the sun all afternoon. No one helped. It's part of the ritual. You hear music in the distance, hand drums, sistrums, clapping, monotone singing. A woman stands in the circle, her body moving to the rhythm, shoulders rolling, hair flying, jewelry chiming like wind through the bronze. She's dancing, not for performance, but as an invitation. Let the gods come see me rejoice. The crowd watches, sweating but bright-eyed. Children mimic the steps. An old man mutters, "I danced faster than that in my day." You don't know if you believe him. He's trembling, just trying to lift his wine jug. Some days there are festivals. People dress up, still just thin linen, don't expect more, apply perfume, and bring bread, beer, and small god statues. There are parades, dancing, music, and mild screaming. Skip it, and people might say you've insulted the gods, which could mean dreams haunted by frogs that walk on 2 legs. You were once invited to a ritual play. The actors were villagers playing Osiris, Isis, and Seth. All dialogue and wild gestures. The script, full of murder, resurrection, punishment, and you dared not doze off, lest you get cast as the corpse. Modern historians say that while life in ancient Egypt was harsh, people still found ways to entertain themselves for joy and spiritual survival. A song, a dance, and a stick game were temporary escapes from heat, pain, and ever-looming death. You see someone playing a flute made of reeds, another dancing with a water bowl on her head, and others singing mythological stories in flat melodies. You witness these strange, beautiful moments, life still burdened, rule-bound, but laughter still alive. You return home and see your child arranging stones in the shape of a fish, pretending it's the god of the river. They laugh, saying, "Look, Mama, it's dancing." You don't see it move, but you laugh too. Because even though you've sweat like a waterfall today, been attacked by flies and had sand in every toe, you laughed. And sometimes, in ancient Egypt, a single laugh in a day was its kind of miracle. You're asleep when you hear funeral horns echoing from afar. It's not a festival day. It's not a prayer hour. It's a funeral. You crawl out from your mat, eyes half shut, and ask the neighbor walking by with a bundle of reeds, "Who passed away?" The answer stuns you, the village chief, and they're looking for someone to accompany him. You swallow hard. In ancient Egypt, death isn't just a goodbye. It's a fully organized migration to the afterlife, and the dead have the right to bring attendants, not statues, not paintings, real people. If you're a slave, a household servant, or even just someone who once brought him water, you might be on the list. No one asks your opinion. You only find out when they knock on your door, hand you a white cloth and say, "Today, you'll do something honorable." You remember your grandmother's story from when you were small. A wealthy man once died, and 2 of his servants were buried with him, not as tribute, but to continue serving him. In the next world, you thought it was just a legend. But today, you see them bringing a blacksmith, a potter, and a long-haired maid. Each walks silently as if they know their life is turning a page, not a happy one. You slip into the crowd. The coffin is elaborately painted, resting on a palanquin flanked by painted gods of Anubis. But you don't look at the coffin. You look at those walking behind it. Their eyes are distant. In their hands, familiar tools. A hammer, an axe, a water jug. You hear someone whisper, "They say he wanted to bring his entire pottery kiln with him." Do you think the kiln's fine, but the people who work in it? That isn't kind. Thankfully, over time, burying live attendants was replaced by small figurines called ushabti, made of wood, stone, or clay, shaped like workers with tools and spell-activated to serve in place of real people. A step toward progress. But only for those who could afford them. You can't afford a figurine to take your place. So you start living quietly. Don't stand out. Don't get noticed. Don't get too close to the wealthy. Modern historians haven't agreed on whether live burial was common. Some say it was rare, limited to the elite. Others point to evidence of young individuals buried with nobles, with no personal coffins. You once worked as a servant for a minor noble. When he fell seriously ill, you quietly quit, claiming your mother had stomach pain for 3 days. You don't have a mother. But you also have no intention of becoming a lifelong assistant in every possible sense. You see a sculptor crying quietly by the river. You ask and he says he once carved his likeness into a noble's tomb. Now that the noble has died, someone joked he should be buried too, to honor the artwork. He's not sure it was a joke. You sculpt a small ushabti from clay yourself. It's not pretty. Bent arms, crooked legs, and the face look more like a fish than a person. But you secretly carve a prayer into the base. If someone tries to bury me, may this figure go instead. That night you dream you're called to a pharaoh's funeral. You're handed a water jug and told to walk into the stone tomb. You scream, wake up, soaked in sweat. The next morning, you volunteer to chop wood on the far edge of the village, away from the tombs. Because in ancient Egypt, no one wanted to stand out. Stand out too much, and you might be chosen to serve for eternity. You've just finished a day of harvest. Your arms ache as if someone's been stepping on them, and your back throbs, but you still manage a smile. The grain is good, the straw golden, and the afternoon breeze whispers through the fields. It seems, at last, after months of sweat, prayers, chasing crocodiles and flies, you've reaped a bountiful harvest. Congratulations! But don't celebrate yet. In ancient Egypt, more grain harvested did not mean more to eat. The more you gathered, curiously enough, the less you got to keep. First comes the tax. Not a paper tax as you know it, but a team of men in white robes, carrying tally boards, arriving in your field, patting your shoulder and announcing, "This year the gods have been generous. Pharaoh rejoices, so we will collect a little extra for the temple." You nod. You have no choice. They eye count your sacks, mark them with sticks, and estimate by generations of experience. You say you have 20 sacks? They record 25. Do you protest? They smile. Are you denying your gratitude to Hapi? And you nod again. Next is the offering fee. Every village has its temple, every temple its festival, every festival its required gifts. Some bring dried fish, others sweet cakes. Your offering is an entire afternoon spent baking 10 cat-shaped loaves you've never tasted. Then comes the communal granary fee. We must preserve grain for the lean season, they tell you. But when the lean season arrives, you never see your share. All you hear are elders sighing. It's been stored too long. Must be spoiled by now. You go home with your share. 1.5 sacks of grain and a small bundle of onions, a fragment of a loaf. You divide what you have. Enough to grind for your family, the rest to offer to your ancestors. Not from superstition, but because you've seen those who forget offerings suffer stomach pain for weeks. You sit and stare at the fields, bitterness in your heart. You sowed, reaped, spread and threshed, but you eat last. And the least. You dare not complain. Ancient Egyptian inscriptions warn, "The tiller of the soil is the most patient of souls, but also the one forbidden to voice anger." The farmer is society's backbone, but never its speaker of truth. You once saw a man resist the tax. He argued his share was overcounted. 3 days later he vanished. Some say he fled. Others whisper he was sentenced to labor on a distant tomb wall. Whatever happened, his once bold eyes were never seen again. Eyes that dared look injustice in the face. You learned to swallow. Swallow words, swallow outrage, even swallow slightly underbaked loaves to meet your overseer's portion. Once you thought, if I harvest less, my tax will be lighter. So you harvested more thinly by hand. Panicked. You didn't want to become someone who despairs of living. But the better you are, the more you lose. You recall the drought year. Harvest was poor. People comforted each other. It's okay, taxes will be light. You still paid the same 2 sacks. The same amount as in your bumper crop. You begin to understand that your share doesn't depend on your work. It depends on others' expectations. You try the math. If you reap 30 sacks, pay 10 in tax, 5 in offering, and 10 to storage, you have 5 left, 3 of which mold if you don't use them quickly. Ultimately, you eat that tiny remainder as if it's a reward, even though you did all the labor. That night, you cook a handful of grain into porridge. You look at the pot and force a bitter smile. A year of toil yields 1 thin bowl of mush with a few onion slivers. But you still eat, because you're still alive. You will be taxed as long as you live. You sigh, not mourning the season, but mourning your labor. Then you tell yourself, next year I'll plant less, so I won't attract attention. It's not laziness. It's a survival strategy. You've heard the tales, how the pyramids were wonders, the pride of ancient Egyptian civilization. Imagine yourself, a builder, raising something magnificent, your hands lifting each stone, sunlight gleaming off your sweat, and your name etched beneath the final block with the words, "This was my work." Then you wake up, and you find yourself hunched under the sun, dragging stones heavy as Seth's wrath across gravel sharp as glass, with sandals thinner than your faith in lunch. You're not building for glory. You're building because there's no choice. You and a long, snaking line of workers haul stones from the riverbank to the site every morning. The lightest blocks weigh nearly a ton. Light means it takes only 12 people to pull. You tie the ropes, wet the ground to make it slick, and then shout in rhythm. "Pull too slowly," the overseer yells. Pull off rhythm and the rope snaps. And if the rope snaps, pray that nothing else does either. You've heard the builders ate well. And sure, there's food. A thin porridge, onions, and beer so thick you have to chew it. You sit beside a pile of stone, chewing while swatting flies, your eyes glancing at inscriptions carved on nearby walls. Pharaoh's name, God's names, the architect's name, not the workers. You once asked, "Don't we get any credit?" An old man spat and scoffed. "Your name is the sweat on the stone, not the writing." You fell silent. Your back begins to ache, shoulders swollen, fingernails cracked, knees stiff. But rest? No. Rest is for the weak. And weakness means losing your meal share. You once witnessed an accident. A stone slipped from its pulley and crushed a man's leg. His scream echoed across the desert. They ran over, pulled him out, wrapped his wound in old linen, and left him beside the wall. No clinic, no physician. Only the hope he'd wake before the flies arrived. Once the wind picked up, sand flew like a storm. You squinted, trying to finish dragging the final stone of the day. An overseer shouted, "Hurry! No work once it's dark!" You thought, good. Dark means rest. You were wrong. Dark means no one sees you fall. Modern historians have long debated who built the pyramids. Some say enslaved people. Others say skilled laborers paid for food and goods. The truth? You think it lies somewhere in between. You're not in chains, but you also didn't choose this. You sleep in a hut near the site. Hut is generous. Its cloth draped over sticks, full of sand. You sleep like an unwrapped mummy, arms trembling from fatigue. And when do you wake up? The drum sounds. A new day. Repeat. You once imagined When it's finished, I'll take my child to see the pyramid. I'll point to the top and say, I once lifted a stone up there. But you don't know which stone. There's no mark, no name. Only the calluses on your hands remain as proof. One worker drew a smiling face in charcoal on a block, then secretly carved a tiny symbol. He was caught, beaten. That stone was flipped. His trace was erased, as if he never existed. You don't dare try the same. So, you keep building. Not because you love the job, but because you must. You watch the pyramid rise, layer by layer, higher and higher, like a mountain. Each block is a piece of someone's lifespan. You look at it and think, no one will remember me, but I'll still be here. At night, you lie still. Your back throbs, your arms burn, your eyes itch with sand. But you helped raise something immortal. It's just a shame your name isn't written on it. You wake up in the morning hoping it'll be cooler than yesterday. You're wrong. It's not cooler. It's hotter. It's so hot you start to suspect you're living inside a giant teapot being boiled by the sun god Ra himself. You step outside. The air slaps your face like a dry cloth preheated in a fire pit. You don't even get to say good morning before sweat starts dripping from your chin. 2 steps in, your heartbeat syncing with the sun's rhythm. There's no spring. No morning chill. There is no such thing as putting on an extra layer. In ancient Egypt, there are only 2 seasons. Hot. And hot enough to make stones sweat. Sand? It's everywhere. In the wind. In your eyes. Crawling into your nose, ears, mouth, and belly button. Some days you bite into your bread and feel like chewing your backyard. An old man once said, long ago it rained in a certain month. He doesn't remember which month. He's not even sure it was rain. Maybe just a dog sneezing on a rooftop. You try bathing in the Nile. Cold water? Think again. It's lukewarm, like boiled foot water. You soak for 5 minutes before feeling like you're being slow cooked. You crawl back to the shore, wrap yourself in a towel, and get hit by a gust of wind so hot it feels like you're swaddled in a bread oven. You glance at your house walls, cracked mud, ground sticky under your bare feet. You try planting a little pole for shade. By noon, the pole is smoldering and not joking. You touch it and hear a soft sizzle from your palm. You see a cat sitting under a tree, yawning. Not from sleepiness, but because the heat has drained its life force. Your donkey lies motionless, eyes rolled back, breathing like a forge bellows. You're not sure whether to give it water or lie down beside it so you don't die alone. Historians say Egypt's climate was stable. Yeah, it is stable the way a cremation chamber is. 1,000 years of reliable roasting. You learn to beat the heat by wearing as little as possible, smearing ash on your skin to deter bugs, and drinking water constantly, even though you know it's questionable. You also learn to move slowly, not from laziness, but because every fast step is a sweat multiplier. At noon, you can't function. The sun bouncing off the sand blurs your vision and your brain feels like bread dough rising in a sealed pot. You should recite a prayer for clarity. You mix it up. You accidentally call on Seth instead of Isis. You slap yourself awake. It doesn't work. You reach for a clay bowl of water to splash your face. It's evaporated. You wonder, did I leave it here yesterday? You're not sure. You're unsure if you're dreaming or awake. Heat can make you delusional. Someone once told you, if you live here long enough, you stop feeling the heat. You look at him, wearing 2 head wraps, sitting in the shade, fanning himself with a crocodile tail while sipping coconut water. Things people like you will never touch. You once saw a child cry, not from being hit, from standing under the sun all afternoon. Not loud tears, just a quiet stream, like a wilting lotus stem. You wiped them away, realizing your hand was hotter than his face. At night you pray for relief, but the daytime heat doesn't leave. It hides inside the walls, waiting to creep out once you lie down. You toss on your mat like a salted fish waiting to dry. You place a hand on your belly and sigh. You don't hate the sun. You wish it were less enthusiastic. You don't ask in ancient Egypt, is it hot today? You ask. Will I be slow roasted alive today? You've held a hoe in your hand since you were 6 years old, and by now it feels more familiar than your rice bowl. You know how to break the earth, pull weeds, and steer a plow, but you've never held a pen. In ancient Egypt, literacy wasn't a given but a privilege, and that privilege didn't belong to those with dirt on their hands and sunburnt necks. It was for the well-born, or those selected to serve in temples, palaces, or the rigid bureaucracy that clung like fish bones in your throat. You once stood outside a schoolroom for noble children. They held reed pens, writing hieroglyphs onto wax-covered wooden boards. They spoke of gods, lunar calendars, and how to write eternity with the correct determinative. You, meanwhile, were dragging a basket of cow dung past the door. You asked your father, "Why don't I get to learn to write?" He replied, "You haven't even learned how to plow straight rows. What would you do with letters?" You couldn't argue. He wasn't wrong. The scribes, the only ones who wrote, sat in the shade, wore white robes, kept their hands clean, and never had to drag stones or dig ditches. They wrote tax records, chronicled noble deeds, and transcribed myths. Their only burden was a pen. You once heard a story about a scribe who miswrote a grain count, and the entire village had to pay extra. You're not sure if it's true, but ever since then you believed writing could kill. People called hieroglyphs the language of the gods. They looked like divine riddles. A line might contain birds, lotuses, eyes, thunderbolts, and what looked suspiciously like a whale doing a somersault. The scribe would nod with satisfaction. You just saw eye strain. You once borrowed a wax tablet and pen from a rich kid, trying to scratch out your name. Your hand was stiff. The strokes wobbled. The boy laughed. "Why does your writing look like a drunk ox slipping in the mud?" You returned the board, head bowed. You thought, even an ox helps pull the plow. What does pretty handwriting feed? You asked your mother, "If I could write, what would I do with it?" She said, "You'd write a letter asking to stop working." But then who would farm the field? You went quiet, then went back to the field. Modern historians often say literacy in ancient Egypt was a marker of status and power. But in the fields, hands holding pens didn't know how to plant onions. And you couldn't live off writing, not if no one was growing the food. You once met an older man who carried a torn papyrus scroll with a few faded lines. "My ancestor was a scribe," he said. "Now, he herds sheep." He doesn't remember the words, but he still treasures the scroll. To remember that I once had hope. You looked at him, then at your own hands, calloused, dirt-streaked. You didn't feel ashamed, but you did wish someone had taught you just one symbol, so you could write your name on the wall of your house. So, if you were ever gone, someone might read it and know, someone like you once lived here. You went home, took a stick, and wrote your name in the sand. The ground was soft, the wind was strong. Your name vanished in minutes. And you thought, maybe letters aren't meant for soil-stained hands. But without these hands, who feeds the ones holding the pen? And then you smiled. Because in ancient Egypt, you couldn't write. But you knew how to live. Do you think stealing a loaf of bread is a small matter? In ancient Egypt, there was no such thing as a small matter. Every misstep, whether caused by hunger, fatigue, or accident, could end with you losing a piece of your body. Because the law back then wasn't strict. It was symbolic. You remember the first time you saw someone paraded through the market, hands bound, forehead red and raw from a burned-in mark. A tiny hieroglyph, seared into the skin with a heated bronze rod. Bread thief. No one said a word. Everyone stared. He wouldn't be allowed to forget. Not that day, not ever. You once asked your mother, "What if I just take a fig, just one?" She replied, "If they catch you, they might cut off your ear. Just one. So the other one can remember why." You thought she was joking. She wasn't. In ancient Egypt, punishment wasn't just about justice, but deterrence. The pain wasn't just for the guilty. It was a lesson broadcast to the entire community. One petty crime today, if unchecked, could grow into a real problem tomorrow. And the state did not like problems. You once witnessed a young man steal a water jar from the temple's storeroom. It wasn't valuable. It's just a jar. He was caught the same day. No lawyers, No trial. A man standing in the square reading charges, followed by 20 cane lashes in the midday sun. You wanted to look away, but no one else did. Everyone learned the same message. Don't touch what isn't yours. Not even a discarded onion peel. Modern historians have found plenty of evidence for these punishments. In records, inscriptions, and murals. Cut ears, branded foreheads, public floggings, exile, even execution. The penalty depended on what was stolen, where, and from whom. Steal from a fellow farmer, you get beaten. Steal from a temple, you're cursed for 3 generations. Steal from the pharaoh, no one has to explain what happens next. A single glance from the judge is as good as a death sentence. You remember a man caught stealing bread from the flood reserves. He was handing it to his wife and children when they found him. No one wept for him, because the bread belonged to the community, and community meant the gods. And stealing from the gods? You might as well never eat again. Once you were questioned just for carrying a full basket through the market. The guard asked, "Who said you could have so much?" You showed a shopping list, ink still wet. The guard nodded, then still lifted your basket lid to check. You didn't blame him. You understood. Trust is dangerous here. Suspicion is survival. You once saw a woman punished for taking temple cloth to sew a dress for her daughter. No one asked why. They only saw the sentence. Kneel in the marketplace for 3 days, head covered in black cloth, a broken pair of scissors laid before her, a symbol of hands misused. You grew afraid, not just of doing wrong, but of thinking wrong. You avoided picking up fallen bread. You avoided touching another person's water jar, even to ask. You taught your child, see something that isn't yours, walk away. He asked, why not just ask permission? You shook your head. Here, even asking could be misinterpreted. At night, you count the things in your house, not out of fear of losing them, but of being accused of having taken something that was never yours. In this place, being robbed is one thing, being blamed for far worse theft. You heard that some villages adopted a gentler punishment, writing the names of thieves on the wall. Sounds merciful, but that name stayed there, forever, and your children would grow up being called descendants of the thief. You sighed, not from fear but from awareness. In ancient Egypt, being righteous wasn't just a virtue, it was self-defense. And you whispered, let no one misread my intentions today. Because the moment suspicion falls on you, you stop being a person. You become a problem that needs to be solved. Do you think spirituality is for people with too much free time? In ancient Egypt, there was full-time pressure. Not just because you believed in the gods, but because you were terrified of what might happen if you forgot them, even for a moment. You wake up, and the first thing you do isn't wash your face. It's glancing out the window and whispering an apology to the sun god for oversleeping and missing his sunset yesterday. You're unsure if Ra holds grudges, but you're not about to find out. You step outside and see your cat licking its fur, casting a cold, golden-eyed look your way. You freeze. No one disturbs a cat. In Egyptian culture, a cat isn't a pet. It's the living embodiment of the goddess Bastet. Step on a cat's tail, and you might as well call it a spiritual accident. You once saw someone kick a cat that had stolen his fish. 3 days later, his stove caught fire. His child got sick, and one of his chickens died. No one searched for causes. They just said, serves him right. At the market, you carry a carnelian amulet shaped like an eye. It's for protection against envy and curses. Because in Egypt, everyone knows that if someone dislikes you, all it takes is 1 second of extra eye contact to shift your fate. You hear your neighbor mutter, he bought new sandals. You shiver. You're not sure if it was an observation or a hex. That night you rub the amulet 3 times and hide the sandals in a jar of rice. You once had a headache for 3 days, not because of illness, but because you forgot to thank Sobek for saving you from a slip near the river. Your mother flicked your forehead and scolded, that's karma for not paying your respects. A dream haunted you, cats scratching you, crocodiles chasing you, dead people staring at you from coffins. You told the local healer. He shook his head, pulled out a papyrus charm with the eye of Horus drawn, and told you to hang it by your bed and recite the incantation nightly. You did. and you believed. Because if you didn't, what else could you rely on? Modern historians describe the ancient Egyptians as devout, ritualistic people. But they rarely mention the deep, gnawing fear not of doctrine but of living within a vast supernatural contract where everything had consequences, even a sneeze in the wrong direction. You once heard quiet laughter at night while passing the cemetery. No one else saw anything. But you were told, don't turn around, don't ask, tell no one, except your mother. You obeyed. Still, you shuddered. You have a copper bracelet etched with a scarab beetle, not for fashion, for warding off spirits. You took it off while bathing and forgot to put it back on. The next morning, rats chewed through your grain sacks. You don't know if it was connected, but ever since, you've worn it even in your sleep. You've developed a habit. Wherever you go, whatever you do, whoever you meet, you whisper a silent prayer. You mumble, even when you forget the words. May the gods understand. My heart is sincere, even if my memory fails. You once saw an older man talking to a roadside stone pillar, not madness. He was asking permission to pass through a local deity's territory. You smiled. Then, they quietly repeated the same request. Better safe than sorry. You live as if performing in a grand spiritual drama, where the props are ash, incense, river water, and hundreds of nameless things you believe are watching you. You lie on your mat at night, breathing slowly, staring at the dark ceiling. You don't dare forget to pray. Don't dare fall asleep without uttering your protection chant. You whisper, "Oh gods, if I did wrong today without knowing, please don't punish me yet. Show me how to fix it next time." And then you drift off, halfway between sleep and fear. You hear murmurs in the village courtyard as people gather, not for a festival, not to carry a statue of the gods, but to listen to the news. There's a new decree from the pharaoh's official. You swallow hard. Everyone knows that any sentence starting with "there's a new decree" never brings anything easy. The messenger reads aloud. All villagers must contribute labor to build a new granary before the flood season arrives. Those who do not participate will have their grain rations cut. You glance at your basket. Only half a sack of grain left for the whole week. A cut in rations means one thing: hunger. You choke down your frustration. The truth is you've just recovered from a bad cold. Your child is still coughing. The fields haven't been fully plowed, but not participating. That's not an option. You put aside your home, change clothes, and join the villagers heading toward the construction site. The granary will be built near the canal on the village's outskirts. The heat is brutal. You see elders leaning on canes, mothers carrying infants, and children hauling sand with their bare hands. No one smiles. No one speaks. There is only heavy breathing and the crack of the overseer's whip. A woman beside you whispers, "Last year, someone collapsed at a site like this. They brought him back and said it was heat stroke." You don't ask the person's name, because here, anyone could become that person. You're assigned to move stones from one pile to another. They're not large, but they're heavy. Thorns pierce your feet. Blisters rise on your hands. Sweat pours from your face in sheets under a cloudless sky. You pause to catch your breath and are shouted at, "Keep moving! Who said you could stop?" You curse silently, then bend down again, not out of fear, but because you're too exhausted to stand straight. By midday, you're given half a dry loaf and a gulp of warm water. You slump onto the ground, your mind blank. A man beside you says, "Once, my village was made to dig a canal. When it was done, the dead were thrown in to fill the trench. No one dared cry." You look back at the pile of stones, and you understand why people say, "Whoever survives the worksite is blessed by the gods." Modern historians believe forced labor in ancient Egypt didn't always mean slavery, but it wasn't truly voluntary either. It existed in that thin space between duty and punishment. You weren't shackled, but you couldn't say no. Someone once tried. A young man left after 3 days. They found him later in a crevice, still clutching a protective amulet. The charm didn't work. He says under a lighting his from a fears had laughed 34 of. Or it was the wrong kind. You keep hauling stones until dusk when your legs no longer feel part of you. You don't cry, you don't scream. You ask yourself, if I die here, who will remember my name? No tombstone, no inscription. Only a patch of wall in a hastily built mud granary before the floodwaters rise. And maybe, if someone someday tears down that wall, they'll find the imprint of your hand pressed into the stone. A small mark, but proof that you were here. Not because you wanted to be, but because you had no other choice. You wake up before even the roosters begin to crow. Not because you're diligent, but because your sleep was restless. Your stomach churns slightly, probably from yesterday's pork and scallion porridge past its prime. You stumble outside. It's still dark. A light mist clings to the wild grass. The air smells of damp earth and the faint scent of incense wafting from a neighbor's early offering. It would be a peaceful morning, if not because you're about to work 12 hours under the sun on just 2 fist-sized meals. Today is dike repair day. You grab your hoe, step into the soggy mud, and begin the familiar rhythm. Chop, lift, flip. Chop, lift, flip. Over and over until your wrists go numb and your feet feel rooted in the muck like Sobek himself is dragging you down. Your child calls out, "Mama, where's the lighter hoe?" You don't answer. The lighter hoe snapped last week. Now there's only the big one, heavy, unwieldy, but still intact like you. By noon, the sun scorches like fire. You wring out your head wrap and place it back on. No trees for shade, no shelters, just endless fields and scattered groans. A man collapses. You rush to him and pour water on his brow. He whispers, "Please don't let me die in the fields. At least let me die at home." You sit beside him, shading his face with a torn cloth. Your hands tremble. Not from fatigue, but because, that could be you one day. Historians might write that ancient Egyptian farmers were highly skilled and knowledgeable about flood cycles and crop timing. They wouldn't be wrong, but they often forget this truth. Every harvest is a struggle, not just with nature, but with your body. You once broke a finger pulling out sedge roots. You once stepped on a mudfish hiding in the muck. You once got chased by a water snake and fell face first into fermenting cow dung, and yet you kept going. Not because you loved the work, but because if you didn't, you wouldn't eat. Your father once said, "Grain doesn't grow from prayers but sweat." Back then you thought he was being philosophical. Now you know. He meant it literally. As dusk falls, you carry a bundle of seedlings on your aching shoulder. Your child runs ahead, singing an old song. "The sun is up, Mama dear. Can I have a bowl of porridge?" You smile, though you know there's barely enough rice left to cook it thin. You sit down, stoke the fire, and cook porridge over damp wood. Smoke stings your eyes. Your child waits, gently swinging their bowl. You ladle the thick part for them, your share, watery as the receding river. That night, as silence settles, you lie on the mat, listening to crickets chirp, and your stomach continues to grumble. You don't wish for sweet dreams. You hope tomorrow, even if it repeats, isn't any worse. And that's enough. You sit at your doorstep, watching the sunset behind the riverbank reeds. The crimson light reflects on the murky water, where fish occasionally ripple the surface, waves that seem to melt away the day's weight. Your child sleeps on your lap, breathing softly, arms wrapped tightly around the little bottle you carved from tree bark. The air is finally cooling. At last, you can breathe without hearing your lungs rasp from dust. You reflect. How many times have you wanted to give up? And yet, you rose again. Because here, people don't live for dreams. They live for each other. If you stop, your family will go hungry. If you fall ill, no one will apply the medicine to your child's rash. No one will return the breadbasket from the market if you collapse. You remember your grandmother used to say, "Life is a cauldron, and we are the firewood. Just burn as long as the pot keeps boiling." You didn't understand then. Now you do. But you've also begun to think, if I am the firewood, maybe I should save a little spark to warm myself. You once dreamed of becoming a priest and learning to read and write. You imagined having a wall of your own, with your name carved into it, marking that you once lived. But then you learn that your presence can endure through your child's hands, the village fields, and the dipper that lifts water from the jar each morning. You watch your child grow, learning to wave flies away, tend plants, not run at the sight of a snake, and whisper a small prayer before pouring water. And you realize you've taught your child how to survive, not through books or lessons, but through each quiet day you piece together from the scraps of life. You look up at the sky. You don't ask for anything. You don't wish for anything. You whisper a quiet phrase to yourself. I'm still here. Not a complaint, a statement. A quiet pride. You don't need anyone to remember your name. Because you know exactly what you did to survive. That is enough, and night falls. Another day ends. You close your eyes, listening to the river, to the wind whispering through the cracks in the thatched walls. You sleep. Not because the weariness is gone, but because you need strength for tomorrow. Even if no one remembers your name, your life leaves its mark on the soil you once walked across. And now, as the journey toward the same draws to a close, you exhale slowly. Every sound seems to drift away. The footsteps on the sand, the whisper of the Nile's wind, even the faint clinking of stone hammers on pyramid walls. It fades into memory, shimmering like sunlight scattered across the water at dusk. You lie down, no longer holding yourself up. The calloused hands are still. The weary shoulders no longer carry weight. Unfinished dreams return gently, like soft incense smoke in the quiet of the night. No one calls. There's nothing left to do. No burden left to bear. Only steady breath and a tender stillness. You feel yourself drifting down a calm river, reeds rustling on either side, and far ahead, a dim golden lamp flickering by the water's edge. And there, the memory of life, not grand but honest and enduring, continues to breathe with the slow current of time. Sleep now. There is nothing left to worry about. You have done enough. You have gone far enough. You may rest now.